Mob Psycho 100 is a fascinating story that covers a wide array of thematic topics. The need for empathy, the struggle for self-betterment, a closer inspection of personal identity, and many more concepts form the thematic backbone of Mob Psycho's story. But it's the way that these themes ultimately build on each other that has grabbed my interest the most. The first season mostly focuses on building up Mob as a character, and the more positive influences in his life letting him know that he doesn't have to conform to a certain standard or fulfill any societal expectations in order to become a successful person. Even though he is far and away the strongest Esper in the series at that point, he does not want to be defined by that power, because that power has not been able to bring him happiness. It failed to impress the girl he had a crush on, it hasn't helped him in overcoming his social awkwardness, and it even causes a strain on his relationship with his brother Ritsu because he was unable to control it in the past. All this power did was make him feel more isolated. However, it's through his membership in the Body Improvement Club and meeting people who he can actually open up to that he starts to improve his own life. This first season is an essential starting point because it has given Mob a stronger sense of agency in regards to his powers and how he wants to use them, which continues to be a main focus in Season 2. The first hint of Mob's self-assertion coming to the forefront in this season occurs in Episode 3. In the first half, Mob and Reagan help a woman who is being stalked by what they think is an evil spirit, but turns out to be a human with psychic powers. Upon realizing this, the woman's fear dissipates and gives way to disgust, but Mob is the only one who seems to pick up on this change in attitude and is deeply puzzled by it, a forecast of things to come. Later in this episode, a group of college students ask Reagan and Mob to exorcise an abandoned house because they saw a spirit in the photo they took there. When they arrive, Mob discovers that the spirits aren't harmful or causing any trouble and simply want to live in peace. Despite this, the students persist in asking for the exorcism, stating that just knowing the spirits are there is creepy. Reagan also pushes the issue in order to keep his customers happy, but notices that there's something off about Mob. Eventually, Mob concludes that not only are the spirits entirely harmless and shouldn't be exorcised, but also that he needs to protect them from the students who don't value their well-being, forcing Reagan to end the situation abruptly to prevent any more confrontation. In this instance, we see Mob not only refuse orders to use his powers for the benefit of humans, but also nearly turn on said humans for their apathy towards spirits. As Reagan notes, Mob's powers are so potent that he is constantly in contact with both the world of humans and the world of spirits, and thus has an equal amount of respect for both sides. This gives him a unique perspective that only he can understand, and, having realized this, his own desires and the scope of what he believes he can do with his powers come more into focus. Now that this idea is more pronounced in his mind, it is only fitting that the next part of the story should force Mob to come to terms with how much his powers affect him by way of challenging his pacifistic tendencies. Such is the case in his confrontation with Mogami. In stark contrast to Mob, Mogami goes out of his way to use his powers to benefit himself as much as possible, often to violent ends. In order to convince Mob that his ideals are correct, he traps Mob in a dream world where he never had any psychic powers. As a result, Mob never gained the connections to people who he met through having those powers, and combined with the crippling social awkwardness he still possesses, he instead lives a life devoid of positive human interaction. He is constantly bullied and pushed around for having no easily identifiable strong points, as Mogami constantly pounds into his head that he was only able to live a good life because he was privileged enough to have psychic powers and stand tall amongst more powerful people, eventually pushing Mob to the point where his desire to lash out at those who bullied him becomes a reasonable course of action. However, it is here that Dimple is finally able to break through Mogami's illusion and remind Mob that he and Reagan are waiting for him to return, allowing Mob to free himself of Mogami's influences. The most interesting part of this sequence is that Mob defeating Mogami doesn't mean that Mogami is wrong. He acknowledges that part of what Mogami said is correct, that he very well could have become a more negative, violent person with a horrible life if he wasn't granted this incredible power. As such, he begins to see his powers as being more of a blessing than he initially believed. This might seem contradictory in comparison to Season 1, where the entire point was to show that having psychic powers isn't that special in the grand scheme of human talent. However, it is much more so a natural evolution of how Mob views himself. At first, he is only able to perceive that his powers can't give him what he desires, deeper connections with other people. It is only after he has acquired this more fundamental need that he is able to view his powers in a different light and see that they do have value in his life. Having learned that people are able to change through his own self-betterment and his interactions with others, most recently through his experience with Asagiri in the dream world, he now believes that he might have the power to help others change, and so he begins to use his powers for that purpose.
もう分かったから。
何が？
人は変われるってこと。最上さんと朝霧さんが教えてくれたんだ。僕もみんなに変えてもらった。僕も誰かを変えられるかもしれないって分かったから。こうやって会えてよかったよ。
With this new knowledge in tow, we come to the climactic battle of the season, where Mob will have to put these new ideals into practice. Mob's first hurdle comes with Minagishi, one of Claw's Ultimate 5, and a squadron of Claw soldiers raiding a convenience store. Though Mob is more than capable of handling them and even seems intent on punishing them, he stays on the defensive for practically the whole fight. It's only when Mogami shows up once more and attempts to kill Minagishi that Mob becomes more assertive. Mogami challenges Mob's ideals once again by asking if he is capable of looking after every Esper who might commit crime at all times, to which Mob responds that he cannot, but that he instead chooses to trust in other people, as, according to him, that is the only way we can move forward as a society. Out of curiosity as to how far Mob can go, Mogami relents, but leaves Mob with a final warning, that not everything can be solved by trust and kindness. A stern, more punitive approach is sometimes needed to convey your ideals. It is incredibly important that Mob is presented with this warning before his final battles, so that this idea is at the forefront of his mind when it needs to be executed. Soon after this, Mob confronts the last two members of Claw, and each encounter produces nearly opposite results. First is Serizawa, another member of the Ultimate 5. Unlike most of the antagonists so far, Mob can immediately tell that Serizawa is not a bad person. He doesn't want to hurt people, but he still wants to follow the orders of his boss because he is the only one who was able to pull him away from his life as a NEET. Rather than simply fight Serizawa in the hopes of defeating him, Mob tries to help him understand where he went wrong. Having been through similar circumstances, he understands why Serizawa would put his trust in the wrong people. And because he is so much more powerful than Serizawa, he is able to use his powers to help him see that he is not alone in this world. Mob's overwhelming abilities not only allow him to overcome Serizawa's powers, but also contain and absorb them into himself, symbolically taking on Serizawa's burdens and attempting to be a true friend that Serizawa can rely on. And, in response, Serizawa gives in to Mob's kindness. In contrast, Mob's final battle is with Toichiro, the leader of Claw and an extreme narcissist who only relies on himself, as he believes his overwhelming power makes him superior to all those around him. Unlike Serizawa, Toichiro doesn't believe he needs someone else to help him, and so he completely cuts himself off from Mob's ability to connect with people and any other perspectives other than his own. So, after Toichiro attempts to kill Reagan, Mob sees that talking it out is no longer an option, and that he'll finally have to put his powers to use in the way Mogami suggested, as punishment.
人の気持ちがわからない奴は まあいい。たまには怪我して学べ。
After a protracted battle, Mob finally pushes Toichiro to use 100% of his power, at which he reluctantly admits that he was not able to save Toichiro and change his mind, thus forcing him into a situation where he has to cause Toichiro great physical pain. And this is immensely fascinating to me. Mob has now proven himself to be practically omnipotent in regards to his psychic abilities. He can psychically defeat anyone, even the strongest psychics in the world. And yet, he still considers this a loss because he was unable to change Toichiro's mind before the worst possible scenario occurred. Mob has moved well beyond desperately trying to find his own place in the world. Now that he has what he wanted, he has started to think about what he can do for others, and he has chosen to be a force for absolute good. One that can not only stop bad people from doing harm, but also change their viewpoints and prevent this behavior in the future. What impresses me the most about Mob is that he went through this incredible progression from I just want to talk to people to I can save other people in such a natural way. His motivation comes from his own past, being unable to control his powers and being fearful of what those powers can do to other people. And so, as someone who has always had a clear moral code thanks to Reagan's guidance, using those powers to help others once he has those powers under control seems like the obvious choice.
He's just a guy from Kansas who has the best superpowers. He's unstoppable. And instead of absolute power corrupting absolutely, absolute power has absolved him from fear and greed and hate and all of the weaknesses that stem from human insecurity.
This attitude is further reflected in how Mob fights other psychics. Because his powers are so immense, Mob rarely has to fear for his own life when someone attacks him. This gives him the opportunity to try and talk his enemies down and stop them from hurting other people. He doesn't want to hurt them, which he easily could. Because he is so benevolent, he would much rather wait until he's exhausted all of his non-violent options before he resorts to inflicting physical punishment.
Superman, when he goes after someone, is essentially not trying to beat them. He's trying to save them from themselves. He doesn't want to have to kill them. He's freaking Superman, so he probably could do it pretty quickly. You think Lex Luthor is going to do much with a gun or in a fist fight to a Kryptonian? His skin is diamond hard. You're looking at a god that walks amongst men.
However, Mob still isn't quite there yet. During his fight with Toichiro, he briefly loses his focus and begins enjoying the full use of his powers, rather than putting all his effort into stopping Toichiro from destroying the city. And, in the end, he still isn't able to stop Toichiro before he is forced to hurt him, nearly allowing him to die in the process as his powers begin to overload. Mob isn't perfect, because he's still human just like everyone else. So there may be times where Mob has to use his powers in a punitive fashion once again. But hopefully this will not come to pass. Mob is incredibly powerful, but he is not flawless. And he is well aware of this. And so I have no doubt that he will continue to improve his life in a way that is entirely his own. Thank you for tuning in to the first episode of this year's 12 Days of Anime. I'll be putting out a new analysis video every day from now until Christmas, so be sure to tune in again tomorrow. Special thanks to Jan Rogalski, Rourketon Join, Christine Seibert, Call Me Catlord, Ryan Johnson, Jennifer Spencer, and all my other patrons for their generous support. My name is Ember, and I'll see you next time.